Next item.
Item C, waive first reading and introduce ordinance amending Chapter 9.16 of the San Bruno Municipal Code to allow leashed dogs in specified city parks.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This item is coming back to you after direction that staff received at the last meeting to craft an ordinance consistent with the City Council's direction. And that direction was to allow dogs under certain circumstances in some of the city's parks. In fact, in 14 of the 19 city parks. And those 14 parks are listed in the staff report. I won't read every one of them, but I will read the ones in which dogs are prohibited from and still will be if this ordinance is introduced and adopted. So those parks in which dogs would still be prohibited are the Catalpa Tot Lot, Herman Park, Lomita Park, Ponderosa Park, and Posey Park. So no dogs in those parks. Dogs are okay in all of the other parks. Those are distributed all around the city, north, south, east, and west. And if you're going to bring a dog to those parks, there's some rules that you need to follow, and those are reflected in the ordinance. So the first rule is no more than 3 dogs at a time, and those dogs have to be on leash. In fact, the leash has to be not more than 6 feet and not retractable, so not one of those 30-foot leashes that the dogs can go running out that really isn't within the handler's control. So, of course, the ordinance also reflects that owners and handlers need to pick up promptly after their dogs. City staff, if the ordinance is introduced and then later adopted, will be putting little stations in those parks with little bags and receptacles to put the dog waste in. So those are things that you need to use. And then finally, the other condition is that those dogs should not be entering areas, the surface areas around children's play areas or synthetic turf. So not in synthetic turf areas, not in children's play areas. Elsewhere in the park, they're allowed on leash, no more than 6 feet, no more than 3 dogs, and pick up after them. So the ordinance that you have in front of you contains all of those features, and it's here before you tonight. Assuming that it's introduced this evening, then it'll come back at the next City Council meeting on the consent calendar for adoption, and then the ordinance would be effective 30 days after that. So it would be 30 days from the next meeting that the dogs would be allowed in all of those parks. After adoption and within that 30-day period, staff is going to be posting signs in all of those parks to let people know, and also, as I mentioned, the little stations with bags and receptacles. So that concludes my staff report. The actions before you tonight are, first of all, to waive the first reading, and then secondly would be to introduce the ordinance. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and the Community Services Director, Carrie Burns, is also available to answer. Thank you.
We also have some, at least I know one member of the public, so with council, I'd like to hear from the public. Pam?
Just one question. Would you be kind enough to clarify what you mean by no more than 3 dogs at a time? Do you mean I can only bring 3 dogs in, or there can only be 3 in the park?
Thank you. That's a great question. That was unclear. No, we're not going to go in the park and count the number of total dogs in the park. That's true. That would be tough. So no, you can only bring 3 dogs. So if there's 10 people, there could be 30 dogs in the park, I suppose. But it's 3 dogs per owner handler. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from audience? Any questions from council? Okay. If not, go ahead.
I would like to waive the first reading and introduce the ordinance.
So one at a time.
Make a motion.
To waive the first reading.
Motion to waive the first reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's been a motion made to waive the first reading. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
I'd like to make a motion to introduce the ordinance.
Just
I just want to introduce the ordinance.
Vicki?
It's this side of the table.
Vice Mayor Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell?
No.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Mayor Medina?
Aye.